Dan Walsh is the best-selling author of 30 faith-based novels, all available on Amazon, including The Unfinished Gift, soon to become a movie, Rescuing Finlay, When Night Comes, and The Reunion, also becoming a movie soon. Over 1.9 million copies of Dan's books are in print or downloaded. They've received over 71,000 Amazon reviews, 4.7-star average, is won both the Caro and Seller Award multiple times. Reviewers often remark about Dan's rich, character-driven storylines and page-turning suspense, even with his inspirational books. He's been writing full-time since 2010. He and his wife, Cindy, have been married 49 years, have two grandchildren and six grandchildren. They live in the Daytona Beach, Florida area where Dan grew up. You can follow him on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, read his blog, or preview all his books on Amazon, or by visiting his website, which is easy to find on Google. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy, and excitement to have on the show today Dan Walsh. How are you doing today, Dan? It's lovely to have you on.
Thanks, Peter. I'm doing very well. Great to be talking with you across the pond, as they say.
Yeah, across the pond, but this must be a very big pond this time around.
It's quite big. Hard to
Quite
believe
a,
our ancestors took 8 weeks to get here, by ship.
mm,
So it's
absolutely.
not like in seconds we're talking, by
Yeah.
satellite, and it's just amazing.
Absolutely, it's a great one. I'm excited about it as well. Thank you very much. And Dan, we are going to get into what inspired you to write The Perfect Stranger, which is the first book in the Gilded Secret series. But
Right.
then you've been a writer now for the past amazing 15 years, and you've even published multiple titles aside from this particular one we're going to be starting with. I wanted to ask you, what is your first creative spark as a writer? What is that thing that fuels you in to write? And also, why did you choose this title for your book? If you can run us through the foundation of your creative process as a writer, that would really be great. I think I've got a lot in there actually for a starter.
Yeah, I almost feel like the president getting all these extra questions at one time. So I'll have to try to see if I can remember them. Well, to start with, I guess the spark was I believed I wanted to be a novelist in 11th grade. So very, very young. I was what's that, a teenager, and that's when you say the spark got lit. I was taking a creative writing course, and I think prior
Oh,
to that, I'd never written anything other than a paragraph and a greeting card or birthday card. So I wasn't thinking, oh, I've always been you know wanting to write. But I took this course in 11th grade, and it's just something lit up in me. Like I loved it, and I got
wow.
A's in everything I wrote. And at the end of the course before the summer break, the teacher pulled me aside and
Mm,
she just kind of said to me privately, she said, "You might be the most gifted natural writer I've ever taught. You
mm,
could actually be a writer if you worked hard at it." And really, obviously, at that age, it really influenced me. Unfortunately, as much as I, got the spark then,
yeah.
it took a very different course for me. That next year, I had a radical conversion to Christ in my senior year of high school. Back
Oh,
then, kind of similar to what's happening in the States here. I don't know if you how much they're paying attention to it in England. The Kirk, they kind of call, when he was assassinated, and now there's just been this unleashing of all across the young people all across America are just
mm,
coming to Christ in like by the thousands. And it's been kind of even my church was a fairly large church, has had to add another service because of all the young people coming to Christ. And they had something similar to that in the 70s when I was a young person. They called it the Jesus Revolution. And when that happened to me, it rocked my world. And
wow.
all the plans I had were kind of changed. I wound up experiencing what people call a call to ministry experience, where I
Mm,
felt like the Lord was saying, "I want you to be a pastor." So for
wow.
the next many years, I studied to become a pastor. And at age 28, I became a pastor. And I never lost the love of fiction, but obviously my life was too full to even think about writing. And so I set it aside and just would read fiction all those years for fun. And I thought maybe, when I'm older. Well, around fast forward to 22 years after being a pastor, I was kind of burning out a bit. and went to a conference to talk about pastors burning out and how to avoid it. And one of the things they said was, you need to find something that helps you relax, something that you really enjoy,
Mhm.
helps recharge your batteries. And my wife reminded me on the way home from the conference, when I met you in high school, you used to love to write. And so that
Wow.
sort of like got me to say, yeah, I did. And I took out, it was on Christmas time, and I happened to just pray, and I got this story idea, which became
Mhm.
this book here called The Unfinished Gift. This was the name of the book, my first book. And when
Wow.
I started writing it, of course, back then there was no Kindle, there was no Amazon, there was no ebooks. It was
Mhm.
the old-fashioned way where you either got, picked by an agent and in the big bookstore, or you just kept trying. So to my great surprise, after writing the book and cleaning it up, an agent, some of the top New York agent, read it and loved it. And 5 weeks
Wow.
later, she had a contract with a major publisher, and it took off. It became a bestseller. Year after trying, I'm standing with a copy of a hardback book with, like I just showed you. My wife took a picture of me at Barnes and Noble. I was like, pinch me. I couldn't
Mhm.
believe it was real. And then my publisher was like, obviously you must have other books. And I was thinking, I don't think so. I have no idea for any other book. I never would imagine I've written 30 books, 15, 16
Mhm.
years later. At that time I was like, I couldn't think of
Mhm.
a second one. And
Wow.
so we did come up with a second one. They all loved that. They bought that. And by the third book, they decided, we need you to write full time, 2 books a year. What can we get? How much do we have to pay you to get you to write 2 books a year? And so that started me on 2010 writing full time, which I've been actually
Wow.
publishing 2 books a year pretty much ever since then. So The Perfect
Wow.
Stranger and The Scandal at the Belmont are the last two that I've written. Uh, and half my books, to answer your question about these books, the Perfect
Wow.
Stranger title kind of came to me because when I got the idea for it's kind of hard to people. I get interviewed a lot, and
Mhm.
people ask, what's your inspiration, or how'd you come up with that?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard for a creative person to explain, because
Oh, it
these things kind of
happens.
come
Yeah.
to you in ways that are hard to. It's like saying, let me give you a class on how I got these ideas. But this particular idea came to me, and I happen to love history. About half of my novels, my 30 novels, are set back in time somewhere. Not all of them, but about half of them. And I was fascinated with this era in America. They called it the Gilded Age, where
Oh.
sort of like Downton Abbey was. It was what was going on during Downton Abbey in England is what was going on in New York and America. And the Titanic, of course, was a very major historical event that tied us together, because it was supposed to come to New York, and it was a maiden voyage, and then supposed to be the beginning of this wonderful, expected hundreds of ship voyages after that. But unfortunately, it sunk
Mhm.
and became this famous, tragedy. So I decided to set my novel, The Perfect Stranger, in the backdrop of
Wow.
the Titanic, and had this idea of look, one of the Gilded Age, you know, families, very wealthy social families in New York,
Mhm.
and this guy coming into this young girl's life who's not quite okay with the family. It's like he doesn't come
Wow.
from. They always back then they were all about class, and
Oh,
when you're if
wow.
you're in our if you're in our class, and whether or not you're fit for our daughter, whether you have the right status or stature. And he was like this guy coming in, and he seemed everything about him seemed right, and she fell in love with him, and the parents and the family did. But there's something in it, something seemed off, and you find
Oh,
out in the first
wow.
chapter in The Perfect Stranger that maybe he's not what you think he is, and maybe
Mhm.
this whole thing is going to turn out to be a very bad scene. And so she starts getting letters. The young girl who's thinking this is the man I'm going to marry, she starts getting anonymous letters that he's not who you think he is, and your whole life is in peril, and your family is in danger if you don't break this off. And it kind of sets up the mystery, of what's
Mhm.
this guy really about.
Mhm.
All in the backdrop again of New York and the
The
Gilded Age.
story. Wow. That is such an amazing narration that you've given in there. I love your description of it. Sounds quite interesting and quite awesome. Thank you very much for
You're
sharing.
welcome.
And I want to go forward and ask you because you've said Skanda at the Belmont, which is the second book in the guided series in New
Right,
York in the summer of 1914. In the
right.
final golden days of the Gilded Age. Now, I wanted to ask you, what drew you to that particular era, and how did you go about capturing its atmosphere so vividly and beautifully?
Obviously, in the era in which we live, because of the internet, because of
Yeah,
Google, and now because of AI, the ability to tap into historical eras is
yeah,
really easy. When I first
yeah.
started writing, I actually have to go to the library and lock myself in the library for days just to find
Wow.
enough research to write. Now I just click, 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 type, type, and all of a sudden amazing things are in my screen. So I was able to
Mm,
really take a deep dive into that era in the first book, The Perfect Stranger.
mm,
And when I was finished, it did so well. It was actually a standalone when I wrote it. I didn't intend for it to become more than that. But after I wrote it, the response to it from everybody was, what else is happening? What's book two going to be? And so I started thinking, when you're a writer, you invest so much in like I spent 5, 6 months, right, writing this book.
mm,
And I know these people. I know the era. I could, if I could get in a time machine, put on the right outfit, I think I could go back there and fake people that I belong.
mm.
That's how much time you spend researching. So the idea of wanting to keep it going was inspiring to me because I really wasn't done with these people. And so I started thinking about what would be a good follow up to the first book. And I thought, what about an old fashioned murder mystery in a hotel? Because the wealthy father in the first book, how he came into his wealth is he owns one of these great big large size skyscraper hotels, plush hotels called the Belmont.
Mm,
And so I thought, well, what if we have a murder happen in the basement of the Belmont? And it
mm.
implicates not just the father, but his family. And it's this great big scandal. And maybe having the hero of the first book get involved because at that time, historically, there was all kinds of corruption in the police
Yeah.
department and they weren't interested in solving the crime. They thought they had their guy and they gave up. But turns out the guy that they arrested was the son of the hotel owner, the brother-in-law of
Wow.
the main guy. And he's like, I can't let my brother-in-law be because they would go to the gallows. If they found you
Mm,
guilty, you're in the gallows like 4 weeks later. There's no, 10, 15 years of prison. So he was just
mm.
desperate to rescue his brother-in-law, and he sets off to solve this mystery that they were called. Their newspapers called it the scandal at the Belmont. That's where I pulled the title from.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting narration you've got in there. Thank you very much for sharing. Absolutely beautiful and so great. And the protagonist in the book, Shax Bennington, finds himself up against a scandal that threatens everything he's built. How much of Shaq's struggle reflect themes or challenges you've observed in real life, whether in your work, whether in history, or maybe who may know your own experiences in any way, maybe.
Yeah, I think there's definitely. I was a pastor for 25 years before my first
Oh,
novel came out.
wow.
Yeah, and full time
Oh,
pastor from the age
wow.
of 28 to 50, whatever that is, 52, 3. And in that time as a pastor, I experienced personally numerous occasions. You would like to think in a church it wouldn't happen, but we're one of the problems that people have in the churches they can be almost famous for it is a scandal can happen where someone's accused of something and the facts are not clear.
Yeah,
The word spreads throughout the church that
so
this
quickly.
and everybody's talking about it. And that's what happens in The Perfect Stranger is this guy who's done his very best to remedy himself and make himself worthy of these people that,
Mm,
he's not in their class, but they've accepted him. Now the scandal, it threatens to erupt and destroy everything. And as
mm,
so for me, I wanted to explore the theme of how people in a church setting, but beyond that, so it certainly happens in politics. It
mm,
just kind of so we're prone to believe bad things about people before we get the facts. And then once we believe those bad things, it can be very, very hard to dislodge that if the truth comes in later that the person was innocent.
mm.
And so I wanted to explore the whole idea of how unfair that is and how churches can be full of hypocrites who are supposed to be loving and caring and
Yeah,
giving, but sometimes they can just be just like everyone else and find the juicy tidbit and they decide to reject this guy, not based on anything real, but all the rumors.
all the
So I want to
rumors.
kind of explore that in that book. There's even a pastor in the book that I guess you could say, I was identifying with, who was really struggling because he's hating what's happening in his church. He believes this guy's
Mm,
innocent, deserves a break, but his whole church is like carried away with this rumor. and he's like
Wow.
feeling like helpless, like all the preaching I do about love and mercy and forgiving, and all you guys are trying to crucify this guy without even facts. So those are the themes I was kind of exploring, but it's not really a preachy book. It's really I would say it's mostly an entertaining tale, but these are the themes that kind of come out in the dialogue and the story as you read.
Oh, wow. This is an amazing story you've told, really. Quite interesting and quite awesome. And I'm so excited that you can give us a snippet into that. That is really powerful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
And there's one thing that interests me most about literature and writing as a reader and also as a writer. Um, and you may want to agree with me that one of the things that makes literature to be quite interesting, it's how it gets interpreted by different readers based on their opinions. I so much find it so fascinating readers' feedback when someone reads something and they give their own different opinions of it. And for somebody like you who has written multiple novels, and of course, you've got so many feedbacks and reviews coming in for you. But sometimes you find some readers who would perfectly understand what the author intend to say. You would also find some people who would be close to getting the message that the author intended, and you would find some who would hilariously misunderstand the book and interpret it upside down. As interestingly fun as this sound, I wanted to ask you, how do you feel when readers interpret your work differently than what you intended? How does that make you feel as a storyteller?
Well, I guess it's what prepared me for this were, if you imagine being a pastor, right? All those
Yeah.
years, every Sunday, I'm giving messages, and
Yeah.
I know what I'm saying, and I know what I'm meaning to say,
Yeah.
and I would have all these people responding, people coming up, and then after the service was over, just chatting with people, whatever, or sometimes in the week with an email. I get that kind of thing you're saying, where people will say, I loved what you shared," or "This thing here really." And I'm listening to what they're saying. I'm thinking, "Were you in the same service as me?" Because it's like I know what my notes, and I don't think I babble. I don't think, but really, it's like I think people can sometimes they have their own lens when they're
Mm,
reading something, and so
yeah.
there's some people I think can tend to be looking for answers, there are things to the riddles of their life. And as they're reading things, and they're thinking that this is speaking to me, and they act like as though somehow there's this mysterious link that and bond that they have, that you're actually addressing them. And as the author, like, I wasn't even thinking that ever. I remember hearing a story. I mean, if you've heard this, but J.R. Tolkien one time was, this is back when he's alive, and of course, Lord of the Rings is one of the masterpieces of literature.
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
was he was in a bus, and it had already become, the books had become famous in England. He was in a bus and he was listening to these four people argue about his book, one of his books, and argue what the author meant, and they're just arguing back and forth. And he said he was sitting and listening to them, thinking nobody got it right. Not one of the four had anything close to what he intended at the thing they were talking about. So it's a puzzling thing. It's funny. Nobody's ever asked me that before, but it really is a puzzling thing, how varied people's perceptions are about a singular theme in the book.
Mm. I think this is one of the most beautiful answers I've gotten to these questions ever since asking other people. This is really interesting and it's really puzzling, to be frankly speaking. And I love what you mentioned, quite beautiful. And I love those beautiful illustration with comparing it to like a service. And like, so are you in the same service with me? I didn't hear that. Or having those group of people arguing about the book, and they also like none of you even get it. It's quite interesting really how people interpret work differently. And one of the things I really do think influence that is people tends to interpret works of literature based on how much of themselves they can find in the character story, how much
Right.
of the experience personally they can find in the character story. That's why you find some people who would even give a book 1 star rating, not because it has grammatical errors, not because of the writing style, but it could just be particularly something you did to their favorite character. Like, how dare you kill her?
Yeah.
How dare you say the mother is? It's very interesting, and it's one of the this is one of the things that makes literature to be quite fun. If you've been in a workshop
I thought of another
setting,
illustration. I'm sure you've been in a group picture, right? 10,
yeah,
15, 20 people, and there's a group picture.
absolutely.
Ask this question. Whenever you see a group picture and you're in the group picture, what's the first thing you do? You
But
look for yourself in the
I,
group,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
It's like, okay, there's 20 people. Where am I? There I am.
That's me. Yeah.
That's what everybody does. And you think whatever that thing is in us that causes us to go do that, that's that subjective way that we approach life. And that's why I think sometimes there's always this opportunity for error when we're constantly trying to evaluate things, out there and through our own lens. Like, how's this affect me? What is this saying to me? What do I believe
Yeah,
about that? Okay, what do you believe about that
absolutely.
may not be relevant. If you're trying
Yeah,
to read
very
something,
true.
what the relevant question is, what was the author intending and how should that affect me? But people
Yeah.
don't generally ask that. Everybody generally kind of approaches it like, what's that mean to me? As though that's the most special thing.
Oh wow, I love
That's
your
my
take.
thought anyway. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love your answer to that question, really. Quite interesting and quite great. And I also like to ask you, Dan, because many readers of your books appreciate the faith-based or inspirational dimension you bring to the table. How does faith or hope, forgiveness, moral choice come into this installment of Gilded Secret series? How does it?
When I was a pastor,
Yeah,
obviously, as a pastor, people come to a church expecting the pastor to speak about very spiritual faith things.
yeah.
People generally come to read fiction with that same expectation.
Mm,
Uh, so they come to be entertained. They come to, escape. They come to, de-stress. And so my ambition or intention is not to preach like when I was a
mm,
preacher. But
yeah.
obviously, my worldview is completely shaped by my faith. And so, for example, like I mentioned in the book Perfect Stranger, I saw the opportunity. Usually, what I'm doing when I'm writing the book, to me, the story is everything. The story is the thing, it's not the message. But
Mm,
while I'm telling the story, I'm looking for opportunities for the characters who I tried to make them very real. In real
mm,
life, if this character, for example, has faith, he comes across this tragedy or conflict or difficulty in the story, how would he approach it? How would
mm,
he react to it? uh, Oftentimes we see movies, TV shows that people are the protagonist has no faith. He's not a church person. He's not a Christian. He maybe it's a very, rugged individualist who just goes off and he's a hero type, whatever. But I thought, well, what if a credible believer? I feel like I'm a credible believer. I don't think I'm a fanatic or extreme, but I thought, well, how would average normal people react to
mm,
tragedies, the kind of things that happened in books, if they had faith? And in a way that looks like for example, somebody who's not a Christian could read my books, and a lot
yeah.
do. One of the things they remark is, well, it wasn't preachy. I was really glad. I thought I was going to be like, something like I'm in church. It's not that at all. But I am
Mm,
looking for ways, incredible ways, for the characters to communicate these kinds of truths that I believe in ways that might help address problems people have, real life problems people have.
mm.
So
Oh,
it's in the background. It's not like my goal is how can I find the way to, put this message in a sneaky way. It's not that. It just so happens this is who I am, and I'm
mm,
writing for who I am. And it's probably they call it they come up with the term faith based now. It's the new
yeah.
way of
Yeah.
expressing things that have a faith element. So I get that. I would say my books are faith based, but they're
Mm,
not. They're not. I really write these so somebody who is a Christian could give it to a friend who's just mildly
yeah.
interested, and they would really love
Absolutely.
the story. They wouldn't be
Yeah.
thinking this is a preachy book and to give it
Yeah.
back. They would be like, "Wow, what a great story."
Yeah. Absolutely. I love your take on that. Quite interesting and quite great. Thank you. And what was the most challenging scene to write in Skanda at the Belmont and why? Conversely, which scene did you most enjoy crafting or writing?
I would say the hardest part of Scandal in Belmont, because in this, here's I got to be careful because that thing about spoilers, giving too
Yeah.
much away, and the people are like, well, why buy the book now? You're already given away the. So I'll be careful when I say. I hopefully won't put a spoiler in there, but in the scene, you can find this from the back of the book, so this is not a spoiler. But
Mm,
the brother-in-law that he looks up to, the Charles, the main character in the first book, his brother-in-law is a young man who's in college and looks up to Charles like a big brother he never had.
Mm,
And this is the guy who gets arrested or accused falsely of murdering his friend. And
mm,
he's now being brought into prison, and all the press has got hold of it, and they're already completely like he's guilty, and the police
mm,
aren't even looking at. It was really hard to see the relationship that this kid that this guy loves is being dragged off to prison. And it's not like
mm.
today; you don't have all these layers of justice between you and the law.
Yeah.
It was really he's put in a dark prison, and it's very hopeless that he's going to make it
Mm,
out of here because nobody's even looking for the killer. They think it's him.
mm.
So that was the hardest part was trying to write those scenes where the family is just shaken to the core that the young man they loved, who's his goal is to take over the hotel, is now
Yeah.
4 or 5 weeks away from being hanged. So
Mm, mm,
probably the most satisfying would be later on in the book. Obviously, Charles, the guy that's the hero in the first book, he realizes that he can't let his brother-in-law languish in prison and die. So he sets it
mm,
upon himself to solve this mystery, even if the police won't help. And one of
mm,
the probably the most satisfying things is towards the end for me when he finally is able to get the police to see what they have not seen and be unwilling to face the fact that they've got it wrong. And that was probably the funnest thing. I won't go into too much detail because that would give away the ending, but that was the fun part. When you finally start to see, all this tension give way to,
mm, mm.
success.
Wow. That's a very interesting one, really. That is so fun to know. And thank you very much for sharing. And I must say, I've been enjoying your answers to this question so far.
Good, good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And apart from the Gilded Secret series, do you have any other works that you are currently working on?
Well, I thought I was going to write something else, but again, this reaction to the first two books has been overwhelming.
Mm,
People are really, you can see it in the reviews when you read the Scandal, the Belmont reviews. They're like, I can't wait for book three.
wow.
And so I thought, okay, what's happening in the backdrop of the story is World War One has already happened in the UK and France in
Mm,
1914 when Book Two happens, but America doesn't get involved until 1917, almost 3 years later. The war is raging, horrible things are happening in Europe, but America
mm,
stayed out of it. Well, I looked at the part of history in New York City what they finally got America involved in the war in 1917, and very
mm,
big crazy things happened in New York City that actually were catalysts for America to get and finally get involved and help Britain out with Germany in the war. And so I thought I wanted to find a way to get Charles, the main character, involved in that episode. And so I thought about it, came up with a great idea, and I loved
mm,
it. I'm already 5 chapters into it. The third book starts in 1917, right
mm,
at the outset of the war, as things are happening and boiling over in America. And now America's faced with the reality that we have to jump in and help Britain fight this war. But it's
mm.
not a war book. It's really about the characters. It's about them
Wow.
dealing with these situations, and Charles, for example, getting involved in this major. He's like really. He's going after now. He's going after German saboteurs. You know,
Mm.
so it's kind of fun. It's an adventure story. Somewhat.
That is really an amazing one, really. And I see that you've got a lot ongoing. I hope you find some times to sleep.
Yeah, sleep is an underrated thing. I mean, as you get older, you find out too. You don't sleep as well. It's funny. I'm 68 now,
Mm.
and I used to for I mean, most of my life, sleep was not an issue. I never thought about sleep. You just got tired, you slept. You woke up the next morning. And it was funny. I talked to my brother. He's just a year older than me. We haven't seen each other in 6 months, and we was
Wow.
comparing notes last week. And he's not sleeping well either. We're getting up 3 or 4 times a night, and you're like, anything can wake you up, and it's like half hour to get back to sleep. And you're like, what is this? And it's just aging. So it'll
Oh,
happen. Lord willing, you'll get old enough, and you'll realize that's just life. Body just slowly unraveling, right?
yeah, yeah. That's such an amazing. I love your answers to this question. Quite interesting and quite awesome. And I like to add this to it because many of your books, let me put it this way, yeah, you've written about love, about loss, about war, about fate and forgiveness. Pretty much very big themes in most contemporary novels. Now, Which of these do you find most challenging to revisit and why?
Ah,
I think it
well,
would
I
be the
would say
war.
it's probably the idea that most people that and again, this is probably some of the things I'm writing about. If I
Yeah.
wasn't a pastor for 25 years, dealing, and I wasn't just a preacher, I was a church of 300, small church. I'm
Wow.
dealing with, I wear a lot of hats. I'm involved with people's lives, my wife and I.
Wow.
So over those 25 years, it's not just, most people just have their own life. I had the life of my life, and then I had the life of all of these
Other
people
people. Yeah.
intimately involved in their tragedies. So I didn't
Mm,
just have my tragedies to deal with; I had theirs, and I
mm,
was there to try to. So it's like in some ways, I got a preview of a whole variety of life challenges that I never would have seen if I had
mm,
a regular job. So in some ways, I think I
mm,
probably inadvertently draw from those experiences, and because one thing
mm,
I saw was kind of uniform, and the thing is, it most people are broken
mm,
in one way or another. And at times we get along and life's going fine, and then things happen and then we fall apart, or things relationally fall apart, and our whole life is going like good one way, and now something comes in and boom, we're dealing with something we don't know what to do. And so
mm,
those are the times when I feel like, for me, obviously, I'm wanting to introduce people to God and the
mm.
idea that God actually cares in those times.
Yes.
That He
Mm,
wants to intervene in those times. So part of my thing is to portray, as my own experience, how God has intervened in my tragedies and the tragedies
mm,
of people I helped, to see it
mm.
doesn't have to end. You don't have to take your life. You don't have to take drugs. You
Have
don't have
to.
to go to all these things that are
Mm,
self-destructive. There's a
don't have
narrow way.
to.
Jesus used this word. There's a narrow way that leads to the life, but there's few that find it. That's kind of, I guess you say, if there's a theme that motivates me, it's that helping people find that narrow way that leads to life.
Mm. Thank you so much for this lovely answer. It's so motivating, quite inspiring as well, and so soothing, very soothing. We all know that, being alive alone, it's an experience, and everybody have what they are dealing with internally, externally. We are humans, and it's like part of human life to always have one or two things ongoing, positive, negative, downside, etc. Yeah, yeah, that's such an I love your answers to these questions.
Here.
Very deep and so motivating, inspiring as well. And I can go on and on and on and on and on with it actually. Thank you very much, Dan.
Welcome, Peter.
Absolutely.
You've asked some really. I've probably done dozens of podcasts.
Hundreds, yeah.
Your questions were very unique and stimulating. So I've enjoyed
Oh.
this.
Thank you. Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you, as a published author that you are, what sort of advice would you give other writers who are still struggling with writing and publishing a book? And also, where exactly can interested viewers get copies of your books from?
Well, the first question would be to write young writers. I would say the most important thing is learn how to write a great book.
Mm,
Uh, there's so much out there about advertising, marketing
yeah,
platforms.
yeah.
How do you stand out from the crowd? How do you break away, and all of these things? And the thing I've learned, I've actually had quite a bit of success with my writing. But the way I write book 30 is the same way I wrote The Unfinished Gift, book one.
Mm, wow.
I believe that basically when people read fiction, everybody wants this. They want a great story, well told. That's it.
Mm,
A great story,
mm,
well told. And if you don't learn how to write, they call it the craft of writing, right? The craft side of things, learning how to write a great book. I actually read, before my first book came out, six or
yeah.
seven novels, I mean, not novels, nonfiction books in the bookstore that they were all about how to write a best-selling novel. And after I
Mm,
had written my first book, I read these books and I realized this book I've written that I'm all excited about is a mess. And so I spent all this time reading these books and going back and changing. I spent a year cleaning up
wow.
my book before I sent it in after all these things I was learning about how to write a great book. And so
Wow.
I've been surprised as I've now had the success. I've taught a lot of writing conferences, even
Mm,
one last month. And I often get questions like that. And I say to people, listen, don't get all caught up in how to be successful. The best thing is you write a book that people can't stop reading once they start, you will be
absolutely.
successful. Because
Yeah.
as you a reader, when you're done reading a book that you loved, what's the first thing you do? You want to find, has this author written anything else?
Another book. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
how they
and if
do.
you have a
Yeah.
friend that loves to read, you say, you got to read this book.
Yeah.
That's marketing and didn't
Yeah.
cost a thing. And
Yeah.
to me, that's how my agent had that reaction to the unfinished gift. And
Mm.
when she sold it to the editor, because I've got to be friends with these people, I wrote 12 books with them. And they said, when we got your book, we couldn't put it down. And we're so jaded because we read books all 40, 50 entries a week. And when
Mm.
we got your book, we couldn't stop reading it, and we're crying at the end. And we thought, if this is our
Oh.
reaction, what are
Mm.
readers going to have? So they're like, they went after me. I mean, literally, it pursued me, and I was like shocked because I thought, I'm this guy, this pastor who's never even been to a writers' conference. All I've ever done is read these books about how to write well. And so
Mm.
I keep trying to redirect, writers' attention. It's about the writing. It's
About
about
the
the quality of
writing,
the writing, the quality of the story.
quality of the story. Hmm. It's a great advice you've got in there. It's about the writing, the quality of the story. Quite interesting, very great. And that really, really do matter. Thank you very much for
Oh,
sharing.
all right. How to get my books? Very
Yeah,
simple. Go to Amazon. In the search, just type Dan Walsh Books or go to Google, Dan Walsh Books. You can go to my website, it's danwalshbooks.com, but I don't sell books on my website. They'll just redirect you to Amazon anyway.
Amazon.
So,
Fantastic. Amazing. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Dan Walsh book directly on Amazon, on Barnes& and Nobles, on Google, on his website, and also on other platforms. I also left a link to Dan's social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Dan, for sitting down with me today to have this conversation around your bodies of amazing literature work because you've written not just one, two, three, but quite a lot of amazing literature work. So I want to say thank you very much once again for joining
thanks,
me
Peter.
today in this
Thanks for
conversation.
reaching out. Appreciate it, Peter. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure as well.